What is your name, your title, and what inspired you to run for office?
My name is Kim Lund. I'm a candidate for the mayor of Bellingham. I recently stepped down from 8 years as executive director of the Bellingham Public Schools Foundation, and I am campaigning full-time right now, seeking to serve my community as mayor. I ran for office, following up on the last part of that question. I'm running for office because I'm a big fan of Bellingham. I'm a deep believer in this community. However, it feels like we're slightly adrift in this moment. And some of the stories that we're telling one another, whether I'm listening to those stories in a backyard, on the campaign trail, around dinner tables, certainly in online forums, are expressing a desire for a Bellingham that could be more. And I want to be a leader for this community and take courageous action so that the stories that we're telling one another look very different in 4 years. I'm interested in stories being told about young professionals, nurses, teachers that can actually afford to buy and live in the city where they serve. I'm interested in stories of bolder action and progress on some of our stalled goals around our climate action plan. These are some of the stories that I'm wanting our community to be telling in 4 years from now.
What are you most proud of in your career?
I've had a non-linear career path. So I'm a chemical engineer by training, and I began my career at Intel Corporation in the Pentium fabs. And the peak of that experience for me was being selected to be part of a fab, a process transfer. So I spent time in Israel handing off the process that I had helped to develop and work on for years, and then was part of a closure team. And it sounds like being part of a closure team might be a sad experience, but it was the opposite. We decided to really lean in and set lofty goals. And during that time, it was a skeleton crew of engineers and my most competent technicians. And during those final months, we set world-class performance for both safety, line yields, and costs. So we were the pinnacle of the manufacturing industry right before we went out. So that was definitely something I'm deeply proud of, to have been part of that team and leading people to reach, being the best that they can be in that moment. I'm also deeply proud of the work that I did at the Schools Foundation. When I took over leadership responsibility there, my budget was just a few tens of thousands of dollars, and there was a large focus just on excellence. Thinking about how can we help students get into elite educational opportunities once they leave Bellingham's K-12 district. And over my 8 years there, I grew the budget to $750,000, was able to set aside hundreds of thousands of dollars into permanently endowed funds, and had a massive shift towards equitable opportunity for all students so that children in our community are better connected to be able to meeting their full potential and still have an opportunity to have excellence as well. So I'm deeply proud of the transformational change that happened at that organization and the way that we were able to support families and students and educators.
The County Council has decided that the jail should be located in Ferndale. Do you agree? If yes, how will you get this project passed?
So the jail is in the county's purview. It's part of the executive's responsibilities, and the budget for that lies in the county. But I think it's hard when you look at the cost estimates for what it would look like to remodel and build up at the existing facility in Bellingham versus the costs that they were looking at for the county. It's hard to ask taxpayers to pay tens of millions of extra dollars to doing a county build. I also believe that with the additional space and the footprint, that they can do a more trauma-informed approach in that new facility, which if you've seen, I've been on a tour of our current jail. It is the opposite of a trauma-informed approach right now. We have to do so much better by the people that are in our jail facility today and the people that work there. That's critical to me. So for those reasons, I I wish we could have made that work downtown. Obviously, that is the ideal, but it just seemed cost prohibitive. So I'm supportive of the council's ultimate decision to go to the county. I'm optimistic that that site will be best suited for the rehabilitative approach that it's been clear that our community has saying that they want to be a priority in whatever facility comes next.
There are a lot of different tools to tackle homelessness, but we don't have endless funding. What do you think is the most effective tool deserving county support? What is your top priority for tackling homelessness?
This is an excellent question, and I'm excited about what we can do here because I see it's in the direct lever of control within the city to be able to impact change here. And by doing that, it's really looking that homelessness is connected to the housing crisis. And we have decades worth of construction deficits and lack of housing supply across the entire continuum. So what does that look like? What can we do at the city? And we have great people and good ideas at the planning department. We need to greenlight innovative approaches. We need to add resources and staff and continue to invest so that we can get permitting times down from 1.5 years to just a few months, because delays in the permitting process create added costs for developers. It disincentivizes growth in our community. So we can flip that around. I think we can absolutely look to other communities that do this work better in this moment. Many communities have more expedited permitting processes. I know our planning director is interested in applying some of those approaches, and I'm a big believer in taking steps forward. It might be imperfect action, but let's take that step forward. Let's adapt and let's measure our results and keep going. I think that there's a lot of practical opportunities to take a look at where our fees and incentives are working against infill and climate goals. And some of those in particular to me right now are looking at our multifamily tax exemption. We have an 8-year and 12-year exemptions. We need to look at pushing out. No one has ever really taken advantage of the 12-year. And the 12-year as it's structured right now is to get more affordable housing and mixed-use development. It's just not penciling out the way we've created it. So let's restructure that so that we can get market rate housing along with workforce housing and affordable housing all in the same project. That makes me excited. Taking a look at our park impact fees. At the state legislative session, we now will have ADUs as a toolkit to do more infill in the community. But the park impact fees for an ADU are almost on par for a single family residence. That seems to be working against our infill goals. So let's take a look at that. Does that make sense to do? And lastly, I think we can really look at parking. We have parking minimums right now that work both against our climate and infill goals. So rethinking our relationship to parking minimums, which are very costly. They add significant costs to housing affordability. And I think that there's a lot of opportunities to incentivize public transportation too if we do that work. So all of those things I think can make a real difference. And expanding the housing supply is absolutely one of my top priorities. I think that it's essential to supporting our community. It's holding back economic growth right now. It's contributing to high rents and housing insecurity. This is the work that I'm really excited to get to do if I step into the mayor's role. I think it will have the most enduring public good for Bellingham. And I absolutely believe, I'm a member of the Walk a Million Trees, that we can grow while preserving and nurturing what makes our community special.
Bellingham has a continued burden of growth that's outstripping our ability to maintain and increase capacity to meet demand. What will you do to ensure that our aging streets and utility systems will be able to meet the needs of the future?
Absolutely. Well, I'm optimistic that federal tools like the Inflation Reduction Act can be a partner in our city's infrastructure modernization. Something beyond just streets and roads is looking at what comes next for wastewater treatment. We put a hold on the Post Point facility, and we have to really look critically. It's going to be a significant capital expense for Bellingham, but what comes next, and how can we explore modern technologies that are both more energy efficient, but also are better able to handle breaking down PFAS and other chemicals and contaminants that are in human waste, so we're not contributing to environmental problem. So I'm really interested in doing that long-term range planning, because the longer we delay and defer that kind of work and that long-term visioning, the more expensive it will be for our community.
Downtown businesses have struggled through the pandemic and the growing impacts of our unhoused community. How will you support our downtown businesses?
I think it's an absolutely yes and moment for our community. I've spent a lot of time over the last few months talking to downtown business owners, and it is clear that they're feeling unheard and unsupported. And I've talked to business owners that spent $30,000 last year on graffiti abatement, or tens of thousands of dollars investing in additional private security. And we have survey results from the Downtown Partnership that nearly 40% of our businesses downtown are actively this year considering relocating. And if we lose our downtown core that we work so hard as a community to make investments in, that feels to me like we'll be losing our beating heart of Bellingham. So how can we make it so small businesses feel heard and supported, and members across the community are feeling welcome to go downtown? And at the same time, we have to keep investing in the people that are unhoused or experiencing lack of access to mental health supports or substance abuse disorder. It has to be a yes and approach in this moment, and I do believe it's possible.
We've seen a growing emphasis on bike and pedestrian improvements in places around town, as well as an increase in car pedestrian accidents in other spots. Do you see Bellingham as a safe community to walk in? Do you think the new bike measures are working?
I think this community has started to make big investments, and we are a biking community. But when I see bike lanes alongside roads, and in particular on Chestnut Street, where we have that odd zigzag of an approach right by the Herald Building, that seems not safe to me. So how can we make it safe as we want to shift modalities? Bikeable, walkable cities. When you go to places that have done this work well, they feel different. They feel good to be navigating through. And I think we could get a lot more people biking and walking, which align with our climate goals. We know that's where we want to go, by going and looking at case studies for cities that are doing this work better than we are in this moment. And making sure, for example, that there's physical separation and barriers that can protect cyclists on the sides of the roads and that are sharing, or that we just look outside of our arterials. Are there other streets that we dedicate for riding, walking, rolling, whatever that might be? So, the Burt Gilman Trail is an absolute asset to the Seattle community. Is it possible to look at the next evolution of our Greenways Fund to do that kind of connector in a really safe way to connect both our green spaces and urban villages? I'd be a big fan of an approach like that.
Bellingham continues to try to embrace its role as a diverse community. What does that mean to you? And as mayor, how will you ensure that everyone feels welcome in our city?
Yeah, absolutely. This was a huge part of the work that we did at the Schools Foundation. The school district has been doing really great work on this, and I think we need to expand that. And I think about, again, like as mayor, what is in my direct influence? And one of the ways that I think we can do better in this community is especially being critical of our appointments. The mayor does a lot of direct appointments to community advisory boards and working groups. And so how do we diversify representation? How do we allow more diverse voices and impacted communities to be part of the conversations on policy and setting a vision for this community's future? And that's in the direct purview of the mayor. So, and thinking about right now, we have so many committees that meet in the middle of the day. That works well for some exempt employees. That doesn't necessarily work well for an hourly employee. How can we bring in childcare, food? How can we expand access to representation to help us create the Bellingham that we all want to live in?
It's a hot summer day and you're craving a beverage. Where do you go and what do you order?
Ooh.
Would you like to share a closing statement?
I'm excited about the opportunity to lead Bellingham. I've been a small business owner in addition to an engineer and nonprofit executive. And, I've thought a lot I spent a lot of time thinking critically about what customer service looks like, what guest experience looks like as a part owner in the Heliotrope Hotel. And I'd like to lend that same critical thought and intention to the city of Bellingham. What is it like to be a member of our community and navigate through the city departments? I think having leadership that sets that kind of vision and intentional approach will benefit all of the members of Bellingham who are really at the top of the organizational chart for the city. So I'm excited to bring my unique skill sets, my vision, and I feel like I know Bellingham. I grew up here, I've raised my family here, but more importantly, I have trusted relationships in different pockets of this community. My time at the Schools Foundation really enabled me to have a strength of relationship in every corner and neighborhood in Bellingham. And I know that will help me be an effective mayor to represent all of Bellingham in this work.